some issues surrounding a couple of cases we've worked on with elder financial abuse. Before we do that, I'd like to welcome you all here. I hope you guys are hungry. I appreciate eating as much of this food as we can. That's our mission today. Oh, she's gone. So Robin Cook is on the way in, and Bob, it looks like you are sitting in kind of like the captain's chair. What I'd like to do is just go around the room. If folks can introduce yourself. I see some new faces, which is awesome. And introduce yourself, say a little bit about what's going on. Bob, feel free to go ahead and address the legislative issue going on as well. So
age, very old face. Part-time attorney, full-time legislative irritant. So what we're doing right now in the legislature, after 4 years of intense work by Tepe, we had a complete rewrite of the Conservatorship Guardianship Act as it exists in Idaho. I posted, and Corey's going to email out a 4-page summary that I gave to the legislature that integrates into the bill with page numbers and line numbers so you can look at it and go through a summary of what's all in there. The bottom lines are: one, gives a lot of clarity in areas we don't have clarity. It adds a whole chapter of parts called on protective arrangements that gives a lot of flexibility short of full conservatorship guardianship. It provides a bunch of constitutional protections on appointment of attorneys, levels of evidence, clearly convincing when it's needed, etc. It retains all the necessary Idaho items. There's about 7 things that we have done in the past in Idaho that we retain that are in there. So if you could look at that in the item, I think it will give you a good interview of what we're doing. What we need is support. The legislature does not react well to the law, and the bill is 112 pages. Part of that, about the last 30 pages, actually, there's all the cross-reference stuff. Because when a changing thing, and in one little part, we're changing a 2 to a 4, we have to put the whole statute in that is contained in. So there's also a lot of repetition within the parts of the act, because in conservatorship and guardianship, they'll have a lot of the same protections and clarity set in. So they parallel. So it's not as complicated as it looks, but it's thorough. And so we need to get the Senate committee, which will hear this on the 28th, to not just say, well, gee, that's nice and all, and so we'll think about it next year. We need to get it done. So we need letters of support initially to the committee. Yeah, any legislators you know, because we need to get this both through the Senate side, but also the House. This is an election year. They may be serious about the March 22nd date because they want to get back and be running their campaigns. So it's imperative to get moving. So any support you can give, letters, etc. If you know a legislator, corner them, tell them how great this is and it needs to get done and why. Because we are constantly seeing people that are being denied basic constitutional rights under our current system. Our current system is a lot better than the standards across the United States, but we need to be as good as we can. So
how do we read that? How do we find that?
Number one, the summary, which is 4 pages, Corey will be emailing out to everybody on the legislative website. If you look for Senate Bill 1349, that's the Senate bill. This is, and you can pull it up there. You can print it. You can download it, or just look at it on screen. Sure. It have a lot of interaction back and forth with the summary. It's probably best to download it and have it so you can mark it, or if you have questions on it.
And March 14th is the date.
22nd is when they're probably going home. 28th of this month is when the Senate committee, Judiciary Rules hears it.
thanks, Bob, for all the work that you've put into that. And I'm going to try to put a link onto the IGFA webpage to the bill that you were talking about and email out the summary of the changes. Okay, Julie.
Julie Adams Ford, I'm an attorney and practice in Nanta. I know lots of you, so good to see you all in person. It's Daigle, elder law, estate planning, probate attorney in
I'm Carrie Williams, and I am the guardian of the county board of community guardians.
I'm Mariah, I'm the county board of guardians as well.
Lynn Smith, I have the Anchorage Care Management. Mary Bauman. She's with the advocate group to guardianship case management.
Janet Caulfield, guardianship monitor for the 3rd district.
I forgot one thing. I was approached by one of the members of the IBA, one of the banks, about finally getting the direct of trust started. Direct of trust allows you to create a trust, but direct that the trustee work with certain either investment advisors or other advisors. And it'd be very handy for when you're going to appoint your idiot brother to be the trustee because there's nobody else. And pending what in the world TRESCO ends up doing, you can't do anything that's not $1 million. And so we got it all put together, put it in some Idaho amendments and put it in, and guess what? The IBA came and said, oh, no, we shouldn't do that. So stay tuned.
I think it's my turn. So Corey McCool, elder law attorney, president of IGFA.
Nate Benjamin, Home Watch Caregivers, AMRAP and Fastest Labs, and board member as well.
Yvonne Baker, Canyon County Board of Community Guardians.
Excellent.
Dan Bodum, Canyon County Board of Community Guardians. Kelly George, Canyon County Board of Community Guardians.
All right, awesome. We'll jump back here then.
Ben Whitaker with Care Handler. We're solutions for in-home care providers and also provide some solutions for guardianship.
All right, great. Hello, come on.
Welcome, come in.
These are my colleagues.
Hi.
Who's,
We're his colleagues.
We have food, we have open seats. Take-
Okay.
Yeah, grab a
take
box.
both.
I'm Robin Cook with Personal Accounting Solutions. I'm a conservator and a CPA, and I'm the treasurer for IGFA. So if anybody would like to perhaps join and pay their dues, I'd be available.
Excellent. All right, well, and I'm Paul Seidemann with TRESCO of Idaho, a professional fiduciary company providing conservatorship and estate management services here in Boise. And co-presenter with Corey today.
All right, so Nate, how are we doing on our Zoom?
I think we're doing all right. I'm not sure why it's not showing you guys now, but let's see if we can change that.
And just to add, I'm secretary, so if I have CEUs at the end, so I will probably put them up there.
It's that thing at the top.
towards the
Click
end.
that.
Yeah, I did, but it
I
won't
have
give me an
CEU
option.
certificates, and I'll put them up on that.
Our niece has just taken over.
Yeah, they don't count. Yeah, they don't count for you guys.
The speaker, I don't know why it's not showing.
So I'm also a board member with IGFA and a board member with the National Guardianship Association. So just save the date if anybody feels like going to the beach. The national conference this October is going to be held in Long Beach, California. So it's one of the opportunities for Idaho to take a direct flight instead of having to jump through a couple of different cities on the way.
As long as we're not on mute.
So that's coming up in mid-October. If anybody wants to learn, have a great experience networking with other people.
Send it
There are people
to
from
Denise and see if she can
from
ask if she can. see us.
guardianship law, people from public guardianship agencies, people from nonprofit groups, for-profit groups, and all kinds of opportunities to learn about how guardianship is working in other places and things that we can learn from them, things that we can share. So it's a great organization to be affiliated with.
Okay, what do you think, Nate?
I think we're good.
We're good?
All right.
Find out here in a minute.
All right, so I'd like to open our presentation today from the presenters, Mr. Paul Seidemann, TRESCO of Idaho, and Corey McCool with McCool Law. We've kind of shared a case with one of our, could someone open the door?
Oh, yep.
If, we've kind of shared one of the cases, and one of the cases, only I've worked on, although, you know, we can always grab, Julie and she can come up here and talk about it if she wants. But, both of these are case situations of vulnerable adults. And so we're basically gonna kind of walk through what happened with these folks. And Paul is gonna start us off with Donna.
Sure. So we'll give a little background about Donna. We first got involved in Donna's case. Boy, I want to say it's been about 4 years ago, somewhere around 2019. And Donna, before her exploitation, was living on a small acreage ranch that's situated between Eagle and Avamore, kind of in the foothills area. So not terribly far out of town, but because it's up a long dirt road, unimproved road up to her property, it's very isolated. And while she was living up there, she separated from her former spouse and was diagnosed with a number of different health issues, one of which was multiple sclerosis. And MS develops lesions in your brain, and depending on where those lesions occur, it has different kinds of effects for different people with that disorder. Sometimes it affects motor skills, sometimes it affects other areas. And in Donna's case, most of the lesions were in her frontal area. And so some of the symptoms that she had as a result of that mimicked things like temporal frontal dementia, where memory may or may not be affected, but the ability to process things, the ability to carry out executive function, it can be significantly compromised. So in that circumstance, somebody doesn't necessarily have a solid appreciation for the consequences of decisions that they make, or the impact of things that they fail to do. So that's what kind of set Donna up for being vulnerable in the first place, was just the fact that because of cognitive results of her health issues, she was easily persuaded that certain people were her allies and that certain people were her enemies. And once she decided that somebody was her ally, she would basically completely ignore any warning signs of what that person was doing that was potentially a danger to her. So she invited at some point, and it's not completely clear exactly how it happened. She's a retired teacher, and invited a young man that she knew from her teaching days in his life to come and stay on the property and give them free rent in exchange for helping out around the small acre farm, well, ranch, not farm, but just a property that needed tending to and maintenance issues that came up. And again, because of Donna's cognitive issues, she was also a victim of self-neglect and also a hoarding disorder. And so she would go and buy things that she didn't need, and would just accumulate stuff and wouldn't take care of trash, wouldn't put away leftover food. And so there was an infestation in the house. And so the house was in disrepair and was an unhealthy environment inside the house. And Donna had a health incident where she ended up becoming septic and was in the hospital in critical care situation for for a period of time, thankfully recovered. But during that period of time, there was a series of things that took place. The young man and his wife took her to an attorney and had new testamentary documents drawn up that made them beneficiaries of her estate plan, and also named them as powers of attorney and successor trustees of her trust that she had set up. And lo and behold, young man and his wife decide that they're just going to move Donna out of this house that's become a horrid situation that's unsanitary. And in order to help Donna out, quote unquote, they're going to clean out the house, move into it themselves, and ship Donna off to go bounce back and forth between both of their parents' places. And they would manage Donna's money for her. I think we all see how that's going to develop.
Yes.
I'll let you introduce John's case.
Okay, so with John's case, he is a Vietnam veteran. He struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder for many, many years, and that was accompanied by issues with depression and difficulties. He also drank excessively. So these issues he struggled with for many, many years. And then he had an auto accident, which led to a TBI, right? Traumatic brain injury, that profoundly affected his executive function and ability to make decisions, and also his memory issues. His marriage fell apart and he was kind of on his own. And then his ex-wife left him with some friends. And then the friends began to kind of act as caregivers for him. And then over a period of time, things developed, which, we don't have a lot of insight into it because John doesn't have any memory of the specific details of what happened. And in that time, due to his depression, his friends had left the house for a short while, and he called the VA and said that he was suicidal. So the VA sent the help team out to John and then picked him up and took him to Intermountain, where to receive treatment. Eventually his sister had been contacted, and she had not been closely involved with his life for some time. And so she was kind of checking in on him at Intermountain. And then she went to where he was living, and she was deeply concerned about how things were going at the house that he was living at. And with the excessive drinking, it didn't appear that he was getting a lot of care, and the folks at Intermountain had concerns with letting him go back into that environment. And so she came to see me about getting a guardianship so that she could set up a living facility at assisted living or something like that and make decisions for him. And I think that's where we're at
Okay,
on John.
All so back to Donna. Meanwhile, back on the ranch. So Donna's young associate and his wife have moved into the house, have Donna now going back and forth between their parents' homes, based on who was available to help take care of her or watch over her. But in the meantime, the young man was controlling all of her finances, was taking all of her income, and was quickly liquidating her remaining investments. And then once that money was gone, decided that the best opportunity was to just refinance the house into he and his wife's name, So that, they were going to get it anyway, because they were named in the estate planning documents, and their expectation was Donna probably wasn't going to live much longer. At one of these homes that Donna was bouncing back and forth from, she would walk from the house to a local store where she would get groceries and personal items with the limited amount of cash that they would give her from time to time. And during one of these walks, she ran across a young fellow who asked about her, what was going on. She looked a little disheveled, and she declared, well, I've been thrown out of my house, and I'm being kept prisoner by these families that won't let me have access to my money and won't let me live in my ranch. And so this resulted in a report to law enforcement, and a meeting with an attorney that Donna had a relationship with previously, who had done some estate planning for her in the past. And that attorney recommended that Donna voluntarily self-petition for a conservatorship. And in this case, with the primary aim of trying to deal with the fallout of all of this money that's gone missing, including a very large tax liability that was looming out there from the IRS, and to try to figure out if there's some way to try to recover the ranch property at some point. So a conservatorship was established, and in the meantime, Donna had taken up with this new young man that she had befriended as she was walking back and forth to the store. And new young man is pretty much just as much of a scoundrel as old young man. So out of the frying pan into the fire. The one that called the police. Yeah, yeah, because he thought now it's his mission to rescue Donna, which also means that he gets access to Donna's money. Well, there's more to the story, but I'll turn it back over and we'll hear the next chapter on John.
Sure. Okay, so as I was saying before, John's sister was investigating, what was going on at the house where he was living, and she was concerned about the lack of care and the drinking. She got him placed into an assisted living facility, and having been appointed guardian and conservator on a temporary emergency basis, she began to take a look at his bank accounts, and as she was going through the bank accounts, she observed many months of unexplained transfers from John's account to his friend's account, adding up to a substantial amount of money. More investigation, we learned that John's house was no longer in his name. It had been conveyed to his friends, and John had no memory of that. He had no knowledge of it. As far as he was concerned, he was the owner of the house. And so I was discussing this with his sister, who was the guardian and conservator. And so as conservator, she petitioned the court for a petition to retrieve John's assets back into his estate and to begin the process of learning more about what happened with that property transfer from his name to his friends, and could we get that set aside based on John's traumatic brain injury and his other mental issues. So we filed the case in, the guardianship case that was already ongoing. We gave notice to, his friends, and then, they filed, a response, which argued a variety of things. If you boil it down, I guess what their primary argument was, John wanted us to have this property. That was his wish. And we were taking care of him, so we kind of deserve it. And so that was their explanation of how they came to own his house. Are we ready for legal steps?
Sure.
Okay.
So legal steps that were taken in Donna's case. As I said, Donna in her meeting with her attorney agreed that she had been victimized because she really wasn't managing her money independently. She would also argue it was because control was just taken away from her, but it was over an extended period of time that she was just allowing herself to be subjected to this exploitation. And her hopes had become very focused on this new young man that she had befriended, who swore that he would stand by her through thick and thin, and would provide a place for them to live together. And it got creepier after that. But she essentially absconded with him and was living around the area, semi-homeless in a partially converted bus that was not quite an RV, that had no kitchen or bathroom facilities in it. And they were just, she thought it was just a grand adventure because they were just out camping in town. And they would just go they would find bushes and whatever else was needed for personal, and so we did end up initiating an emergency petition for a temporary guardianship in order to have authority to separate her from this new young savior, and have her move in, at least temporarily, to a facility that offered independent living, which she qualified for. And it was a safe place for her to stay while we figured out some other future living arrangement. Fast forward on that, it's now been, I think, 3 or 4 years that we've been involved in this case. She's still in the same place because every time we or her close friend that's been helping her try to talk to her about moving someplace else, she just can't make decisions like that, and just freezes up and refuses to go along with any other suggestions, but will constantly complain about the place that she is, that the food is terrible and that there's nothing to do, and it's so expensive, and somehow, of course, it's all my fault. Regardless of the fact that we've been trying to encourage her to explore other alternatives for a long time. But on the justice side of all of this, this case actually ended up starting out with Ada County, with the sheriff's office. And the detective there uncovered so much information, she actually referred it to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Idaho for federal charges, because there was transfer of properties, there were wire transfers, and other things that warranted federal charges, including they found that although he was acting as power of attorney and then successor trustee, he failed to file any of her tax returns to report any of her income. He changed the withholding on her pensions so that there was no tax being withheld from the distributions. So he was maximizing the amount of money he could get control of, and leaving Donna and her estate with all of the tax burden that came along with that. So felony charges were filed by the US Attorney's Office last year. I believe it was in early 2023. So it took about 3 years or longer for those charges to finally materialize. Part of that was just the number of agencies that were involved in the investigation. So you had Ada County Sheriff, then you had the US Attorney's Office. They had an investigator from the Inspector General's Office of Social Security and an investigator from the IRS Criminal Investigations Unit that were all looking at various aspects of this case. And the wife ended up getting swept up because right after they got arraigned and they were being held in jail, the wife made a phone call. And the phone call was not to her attorney. The phone call was to her family members to say, you need to destroy that Dell laptop because it contains incriminating evidence. And so the wife ended up, of course, being recorded, and the recording was passed on to the US attorney. And so they ended up filing felony obstruction of justice and something about deliberate destruction of evidence charges against the wife. And both of which ended up pleading guilty to their crimes just earlier this year. And we now have sentencing pending, looks like in May. So we'll find out how long the two of them are likely to end up being in federal prison. The husband, I suspect, is going to be significantly longer than the wife. Both of them, the crimes that they've pled guilty to, have sentences of up to 20 years plus fines. But for Donna, that doesn't help her very much because the money's gone, the property was transferred, and now what do we do? And this is where having Corey as Donna's attorney in the case turned out to be a great thing for Donna, because we were able to successfully file within the conservatorship action civil proceedings to have the trustee transfer undone. And we prevailed with summary judgment because the guy didn't hire an attorney to represent him. He represented himself pro se and didn't do it very well. And so we quickly won a summary judgment, and the judge agreed in the order to provide language that returned the status of the property as though the transfer had never occurred, which also has an impact on the loans that had been taken out by the couple. And so we're in the process now of following up with those two lenders. There was a mortgage loan and a home equity loan that were taken out. And we just got word this week that the home equity loan is already releasing their lien. And we're hoping that the mortgage company will follow suit and recognize the order, and we'll get the ranch property back free and clear of any liens.
Awesome.
And so just to add a little to that on Donna, about a year ago, I guess it was right at a year ago, when I was looking at the fact that the property had been transferred to the Friends, which, by the way, during all of these years that Paul's been talking about, guess who had been living at the ranch? So that they've been out there just enjoying life for free on Donna's property. And so I was talking with the prosecuting attorney with the US Department of Justice, and we decided that the best thing to do was to initiate a civil action alongside and allow them to continue the criminal side for a variety of reasons. One, at that point, they had filed their criminal charges, but they were a long ways away from a conviction necessarily. And there's always the danger of what happens if you go to a jury trial, what may or may not happen. The other thing that we were dealing with was the statute of limitations. And these actions had occurred some years ago. Strictly speaking, we were already outside of the statute of limitations from the time the illegal act occurred to the time it was last year. The thing that saved us though is that when the transfers had happened, Donna did not know that those transfers had happened. Her trustee did those things, but she had no knowledge that the property was no longer in her name. And so the statute of limitations is really not going to start running until she learns of the event. But even so, we still had an issue as after TRESCO had become conservator, we knew that this issue was ongoing. And so we were less than a year out from running out of time. So we didn't want to let the feds just mess things up and then wind up sitting here outside the statute of limitations. So we initiated the case. Things went along. It seemingly took forever just to get, things resolved, but we finally did. We got the number one strategy employed by the Friends to avoid the issue was multiple filings for continuances. There were at least 4. I can't make this hearing. My back hurts. This, that, and the other. And so this just we just kind of moved along until finally we were scheduled for our evidentiary hearing. And James had said that he was recovering from surgery. He was just completely unable to present his case. But it was a Zoom hearing, and so the judge is like, get over it. We can put a camera in front of your face. So he's lying there in bed.
One positive, they got COVID, right?
Yeah. Basically immobile, and although quite articulate, he had a lot to say, and he kept repeating, my wife is holding the phone and I need to move once in a while, Your Honor, because of all the pain and so forth. So we were successful. We got the judgment we needed to get the property transfer. And then we almost immediately after that sent out notice for eviction, 30 days to get out of the property. So this is the part that I like. The process server is going out to the property. This was like 2 weeks later. What a recovery. He was out in the front yard playing with his dogs. And when he saw the vehicle coming up, he runs in the house and is hiding in the house and not answering the door. And she's saying, Mr. I have this here, she's like yelling through the window or whatever. And there's no response. She says, well, I'm putting your notice here. And she goes off and so anyway, I was almost hoping that we would have to have another hearing to get him fully kicked out so that I could share with the judge, like, look, Judge, remember this poor guy laying on his back in bed on Zoom and all of a sudden he's just running around the yard playing with the dogs. So anyway, he left a few days before his 30 days were up. And it's really hard to describe in mere words the condition of the property. It was just trash everywhere. But the one thing that I can say is the one mistake I made was opening the refrigerator door. So it was rotting food inside of the refrigerator. And I'm like, that's just pure spite to do that. So we then provided notice to the lien holders, asking them to just release their lien and provide them all the legal paperwork and Donna's struggles with all of this and how innocent she was. And one of them last week on Valentine's Day filed a release of lien. We're waiting for the other folks. And not entirely sure. They're reviewing the paperwork, which they received on like November 20th. I'm not sure how long it takes to go through 3 or 4 pages, but they are carefully investigating their options. They do not want to let that lien go. But the thing is, that lien was obtained by the mortgage company on the same day that the culprit transferred the property to himself. And so I just don't see how the title company or whoever could not see anything suspicious about this person transferring property from someone who has a completely different name than him to himself. It just looks to me like red flags should have been everywhere. So I think they just need to let that lien go and consider it a lesson learned. So
another piece that that we learned in this process as well was U.S. Attorney, when they filed their charges, also filed a notice that the property was subject to forfeiture proceedings from the U.S. government, which helped us in one respect because they just decided to stop making payments on these loans and they were going to go into foreclosure. And the fact that the U.S. government had filed this notice of forfeiture actually prevented either of the lenders from foreclosing on the property in the meantime.
Good.
And thankfully, we were able to get it back this way because the process of forfeiture, had they been found guilty or convicted otherwise of the crimes, the forfeiture process is not something that happens in a couple of weeks. And it would take the property back to ownership from the U.S. government. The U.S. government would then figure out how to liquidate that asset in order to recover funds for the impacted party. And so there was no real assurance if it went through the forfeiture process, first of all, that anything would happen quickly and that Donna would in fact get her property back. And so we were able to collaborate with them where they kept that notice in place while Corey worked through this correspondence with the lenders to try to get these loans just completely released from title.
Wow.
okay, so that brings us back to John, who is at the assisted living facility, and we're waiting through the legal process of trying to get his property returned to him. And his friends learn where he's at, and they know when his pension payment comes through to the bank, which the bank had been notified that his bank account was in a conservatorship. Nevertheless, John and his friend go to the bank. They withdraw the entire check that had been deposited like a day or so earlier. And they go and pick up a significant quantity of what's the Fireball. Yes, that is his drink of choice, Fireball. He goes back to his facility. He's got like a lot of Fireball. So his check is a few $1,000s. You know, a Fireball's not that expensive. So I don't know what happened to the rest of the money, but John appeared to be happy. So he's getting in trouble with the facility because he's smoking, and that brings a call to the Guardian, who goes to see what's going on with John, and she discovers all of this alcohol, and she contacts me. John said, she's like, where did you get the money? Oh, I just went to the bank and got it. So then she goes to the bank and learns that his entire monthly check had just disappeared. So, and kudos to the bank, the person at the front desk or the clerk or whatever made a mistake, obviously. They reimbursed the money, because they were like, okay, we should not have just transferred this money to John. So that, kudos to them. And then we filed a protection order. CPO filed a civil protection order to separate John from his friend, who did not appear to be providing the best interests for John, although I guess John to some extent thought it was. But so we got the protection order separate so that we could separate this person from John. And various filings, this, that, and the other, we tried to get things set right. We eventually came to trial day. We reached a settlement that transferred the bulk of the property. It was a division of the property, recognizing the care given by the friends and the property that John owned, and we were trying to work out a cooperative arrangement with these folks. This was about a year ago now, and one of the things that they were required to do was to work with the real estate agent to get the property sold, so that John can get the money he needs to pay for his care. And over time, it became pretty clear that they were really not cooperating with getting the property sold. It was in a state of disarray. It smelled. The dogs would greet people coming to look at the property by jumping on them. And there was dog poop on the floor. And so eventually we came to the decision that the settlement arrangement was not just not going to work, because these folks like living where they're at. And their statement was, this is our forever home. And I'm like, it's really not your home, you know, and certainly not forever. So their strategy all along has been delay, delay, delay. So we have a summary judgment hearing in April, which we're hoping brings this thing eventually to a close. And the one thing I can say about both John and Donna, the thing about property is you can't just put property in your wallet and walk away. The property, you can kind of mess the property up and destroy it, but at least it's always going to be there. You can bring that back in, but unfortunately, money that's in a bank account that just gets taken, it's hard to ever get that back. It just goes away into the breeze. So with the case with John, you know, these kinds of cases, when you're talking about bringing criminal charges, the criminal charges is a pretty steep hill to climb. And so when you have people who are living together in an apparently consensual arrangement with a power of attorney and so forth, it's hard for the prosecutors to come in and say that these were criminal. So we never really went the criminal route with John, and great work from the federal folks on Donna. So, but unfortunately, these criminal convictions are not common. So it's good to see that happen once in a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have other cases that Julie, yeah, I know.
Just one.
They get, we have, you know, one kid that impacted his grandfather to the tune of $800,000.
Mm.
And I provided like a 47-page document to the prosecutor. He got 30 days with probation, and barely a slap on the wrist. And we're still arguing over restitution. We have a contested restitution hearing at the end of March. So I'll get to spend the day going through my itemization of all the things that he did over a period of roughly 4 years to his grandfather. But so one final note with Donna. So one of Donna's hopes has always been that she gets to move back to the ranch, but she really wants her new friend to move in with her so that he can help take care of things at the ranch. And her friend and I have tried to talk to her about this other guy. You know, in the meantime, between when he quote unquote rescued her and the time that he's now no longer living in Idaho, he's got about a half dozen judgments against him from various business dealings where he scammed people, and he's got a warrant out for his arrest for a contempt of court hearing where he failed to appear in one of these cases. So if he ever does show up, I'll be more than happy to let law enforcement know that he's in the area. Yeah.
Would she have been helped if he had not come into her life?
One if I helped.
Well,
I mean, honestly, it's hard to say, right? Because I think if all he had done was intervene,
he's the one who turned her over to the law enforcement and everything.
yeah, he's the one that helped her go to the police and file the initial report. So it wasn't, yeah, exactly. And this is where, you know, a lot of these cases, it's not just strictly black and white. There are lots of nuances in some of these things. So this other guy, there were some good things that he did for her, but then he basically was dedicated to trying to undermine all of the other things that people were trying to do, and the course of action that her attorney at the time was recommending, and she just glazed over and was just blindly following this guy, thinking that he was just the best thing ever. And we all saw that he was going to take her down the same path, and all he cared about was getting access to her paycheck, which was more than enough for him to live off of.
But the interesting thing is, like, I've had a case several years ago that same thing, the guy who reached out to the attorney and said, hey, she has dementia, she needs help, is now in prison for taking advantage of her friend and neighbor. And that one was in the news too. And it's like,
Yeah.
I couldn't wrap my mind around, you go to an attorney for help for her. And I could see it really easy, you know, what he was doing and just weird.
Mhm.
And I refused to let him visit where my client had moved, and he took me to, you know, file the complaint, took me to court for that. Then he turned around and was like, okay, now I'm just gonna attach on to her friend
Mhm.
and take advantage of her, because they used to both go to the bank and try and pull out money and they could say sorry.
Right.
And so it was just weird to me that reaching out for help, but then you're turning around and taking advantage of, you know, whether it's her or somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's just weird that mindset of.
And that's where there's this, you know, we sometimes have to do this balancing act of, there's a freedom of association that somebody, even if they are under a guardianship and or a conservatorship, they still have the right to associate with people that they want to associate with, unless there's reason where we, you know, believe that they may be subject to some kind of harm.
And the new act provides extensive guidance on that.
Yeah.
So could a protection order be written, be sought even now for this guy, because they did live together at one point in time when they were in that awesome little trailer van or whatever.
Right.
So, that would be one additional measure.
I kind of think that he's probably mostly out of the picture at this point, because I think he kept thinking that he would find a way to be able to get control of her money. And through all of this, one of the things that it did reinforce was We did initially seek for a guardianship, a limited temporary guardian for her to help her get away from this guy and into a stable, safe environment. Because if she had kept on with him, she would have died with her health conditions. She has some very serious health issues and was completely, wasn't taking her medication. Her diet was fast food stuff that was not helpful for the issues that she was dealing with. And I think that if she had been with him another 6 months, probably wouldn't have made it. And she just has no appreciation for that, no understanding that her health is really that fragile. But we also recognize that people have the right to make bad choices and be friends with people who are not great people, as long as we can set enough of a boundary that they're not a danger. And so we didn't advocate ultimately for the appointment of a permanent guardian. And so she was still free to make her own decision about where she lived, which again was one of the problems because she never wanted to move out of where she was and we couldn't force her. But the biggest thing was having a conservatorship that controlled the purse strings so that this other guy couldn't just take off and start doing all the stuff that the other guy was doing. So, at this point, we've been hoping that we would get to this scenario where she might get to go back to the ranch. And even if she's only able to stay there for a year or two, I would much rather have her there where she really wants to be. And I think that's going to be a fantastic end to her story.
But no, wait, you said the ranch is pretty dilapidated. I mean, is it a safe place for her to go back?
Well, it's gross right now, but it's actually, it is habitable. They were living in it and,
Yeah.
so they remodeled it before they moved in. They spent all of her money remodeling her house and then they moved in.
Would this be
And
safe for her to go in?
yeah, it would be. It's just, I mean, they were not clean people, so there's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen before it's really, a sanitary environment for Donna, but she'll be able to live there.
And you could have an arrangement where people would come out to check on her from time to time, right?
That's one of the challenges is that property, again, it's one of those things where it's not that far away, but it's remote. And the fact that you have to go up this, about a mile of unimproved single lane dirt road going between foothills, no cell phone coverage. And so, particularly in wintertime, it could present a bit of a challenge trying to get supplies and people to her. But if we can get her there sometime in the next few months, that would be fantastic. And her friend has been kind of her caregiver and advocate, and taking her to doctor appointments and such. And we've been talking about services that can be provided for her, like meal deliveries and things like that will help her be able to be there because she can't make macaroni and cheese. So she really is dependent on other people preparing food for her.
Like Meals on Wheels?
Something like that, or something better.
Meals on four-wheel drive wheels.
So,
And just to clarify,
yeah, there's some meal boxes now that you can get fully prepared meals that just go in the fridge and you take them out, warm them up, and they're ready to go.
and Paul keeps mentioning about Donna's friend. And sometimes the friend is doing nice things and sometimes the friend is doing not nice things, but there's two friends.
Oh, I apologize. Yes.
One is a woman who's a longtime
friend who was a fellow teacher with Donna when she
Yeah.
was teaching.
Yeah.
And that friend, I apologize for the lack of clarity. Thank you for bringing that up. So she has a good friend that has
And a
been
bad friend.
weathering through all of this, even though Donna can be difficult.
That's the one that takes her to medical.
Takes her to medical appointments and has persisted even when Donna has not been terribly nice to her. And yeah.
And
Bob.
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Or comment.
Well, I was just gonna say that, in answer to kind of what a lot of folks have been thinking, these cases can be so gray and murky because the culprit is often also the grandson or the daughter or the close friend who has been sometimes providing a lot of care over a fairly long period of time. And it develops in their mind a certain sense of entitlement and sometimes the person who has lost their ability to make good decisions wants their caregiver to have things. And so they start giving things to them. And then the question is, when do these gifts cross a line to abuse? And so after some time has passed by, then we look and like, wow, this is definitely an abusive relationship and this person has been totally taken advantage of. But that's after you get a couple of years and you're looking back over the longevity of it. Sometimes when the caregiver is like in the midst of it, it doesn't seem so obvious that they're the culprit for a while. And so although with Donna's case, some of those events that happened there for a short period of time were, I think that was pretty obvious that this person was clearly taking advantage of Donna to the point that I think he was hoping for her to just die. And if she had died, I don't think anyone would have ever been the wiser. That property just would have transferred to those folks and nothing would have ever been said or done. But Bob, you had a.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, on the question of why somebody who acted good at first would not later. I don't know if I'm allowed to quote Bible anymore, but from Proverbs, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I sometimes talk about people who think that people have this innate blame, either good or bad. What would you do if you walked into a friend's house that now is in the hospital and they were sitting on the table was a gold bar and you knew it was not traceable and that they were in a coma, would not be able to tell what had been there and you knew there were no records of it, would you take it? And I'm not sure any of us could absolutely say, I wouldn't at least be tempted. The thing that concerns me in this, in addition to what you talked about on the title company, is attorneys that don't do basic checks on capacity, undue influence, and so forth. And especially when somebody's brought in by people totally unrelated to her, no names in common, and with massive changes in their estate plan. Why in the world would you just try to smile and do that? And same thing on the notary. Did the notary check this person at least has some elements of capacity enough to make that signature, etc. So there's a lot of problems in these that are caused by people getting too complacent in what they do.
So is there any recourse? I mean, not take a case like that right now, that, they went, her boyfriend took her to the previous attorney that had done the estate plan, and that attorney was like, nope, I'm gonna say no, because you bring this friend in, you're changing everything from your family member to him now, and he said no. Well, they just talked to a different attorney who, maybe it's a young thing, I don't know, but he was like, sure, okay. And, undid everything and, like, what recourse is there for him, for that attorney that undid everything and made it into a mess? And now here we are with, other attorneys' fees and, guardian, conservator, like, what recourse is there?
Well, I'm an expert witness in two cases I can't talk about on those types of issues. About the duties of an attorney to make those kinds of inquiries, but one on when they don't have duties to make inquiries. When there's everything on the surface that's exactly wonderful, can somebody try to avoid the changes in EP, which were valid, because he didn't go over and go through the hospital and everything she'd ever had, talk to all her doctors when she had no medical issues. That was just an attempt to create an argument, as people do. But many times we see attorneys that frankly have avoided a massive amount of malpractice charges and potential even suspensions from the bar or whatever, because they fail to do the basic things you have to do. And I wish I could tell you there's some easy way to take care of that. There isn't, because you have to go now backwards in time, trying to figure out in the past, was somebody competent, and did they have any outside undue influence? And those are very hard because we don't have all these cameras on everybody 24/7. So no, it's not easy.
One of the things as a practitioner that I do, when I see people, as I establish, and I know that Bob and Julie would both second this, I establish with
the whole kit and caboodle, who is my client here? And one of the things, when we've got multiple people sitting in on this, I separate that immediately. I need to be speaking with the person I'm serving. And if that starts to make a lot of people nervous, then my red flags and my hackles are going up. So that's part and parcel of it.
And that's what the
Attorneys need training.
And that's what the good attorney did. He
Yeah.
separated the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
We always phrase it as protecting both sides.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, we don't want somebody later saying you had undue influence.
Right.
Oh, I'm protecting you, and they don't believe that. But that
And you can pay me for her stuff that I'm doing, but it still doesn't mean that you become my client. If so, but whatever, right,
Yeah.
And the bar now says you better get that in writing.
Yeah.
I can't believe that the lien or the loan was done on the same day as the transfer. They do title searches that.
Well, he was the
is-
successor trustee of the trust that owned the property. So he's signing as trustee, selling it from the trust to himself and his wife. So he had quote unquote legal authority, and that's as far as they dug. They didn't look at the fact that a trustee has a conflict of interest that might need to be, there may have been a need for court approval for taking that action, which is what one of our main arguments was, that he didn't get court approval for that transfer. And even if he had sold it to himself, he didn't do it for fair market value where Donna received additional benefit. I mean, theoretically, if he had bought it for fair market value and put that money into an account for Donna and spent that money on Donna, that would have been, it would have not been okay, but it would have been, it wouldn't have been criminal. It just would have been unethical.
Yeah.
So,
And that's
yeah.
why we need a uniform trust code.
Yeah.
And I have a basic decision to make after this session. Are we going to go look at the IBA in the face and tell them, pardon me, screw you, we're doing this. I don't care that you don't like it, we're gonna do it. If so, we're gonna need a lot of support for that, but there's a ton of stuff in that UTC that we absolutely need.
Well, that's a whole nother topic, and I appreciate you bringing that up. We are having some real issues right now in trust providers, and when the banks are not willing to take on certain kinds of trusts, the screws are coming down, even on the granted exceptions for CPAs and attorneys. They're now saying that it has to be a genuine long-term relationship with the client prior to becoming successor trustee of their trust. You can't just open a file and say, yep, we've got a relationship.
Certain CPA, I will not name, would say, come on in, we'll talk about taxes for 5 minutes. Okay, now you're a long-term client and I'm gonna be your trustee.
All I know is that there are a number of parties.
Yeah.
There's a number of parties that are under that right now
The
with the
good thing
Department of
is there
Finance.
are 2 new people at the Department of Finance that I'm working with that seem to be genuinely interested, getting all this stuff here, doing a lot more protections and distancing themselves from the IBA. And I'm hoping that will come to fruition. And I'm also meeting with the head of the department, Patsy, to discuss things like your situation, but in general.
Yeah.
Why we gotta have this fixed.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Yeah, and it's, again, I mean, Robin, TRESCO and others have been doing good work in some of these, some of the areas where there's nobody else to take on these trust cases because the banks won't take something if it doesn't have a certain dollar amount attached to it. Especially, but even if it has some money, if it has certain red flags like people in litigation or complex assets that are illiquid, they don't want to deal with that stuff. They want something that they can take into their assets under management as an investment advisor, and they're making money on the long-term investments.
That's right.
So they don't want to settle estates and write all the checks after a few months. They want to bring stuff in that they're going to keep for 10 years.
And that's why they oppose the directed trust, but they say that then we don't get the money, manage the money in every case.
Oh, I saw that coming, because they're like, yeah, we're not gonna be the trustee, but not get to manage the money in-house, because that's how they make their money.
Yeah,
And
which
I've
is
been
really
sent-
policy, not law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been sent so much from certain certain banks of that nature are telling me how to edit my requests in favor of that.
Yeah.
That Flips me off like nobody's business.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So guys, we are running out of time, and so we have a sign-in sheet somewhere. If you haven't signed in, please do. Lynn is working on getting credits for folks, and so
Knocking over canes.
Lynn, I'll let,
Certificates, they're signed, I'm not sure why I'm signing them, I'm not the presenter, but anyway. Secretary.
As
secretary, that sounds like a secretary job.
Okay.
Additional credits. And then so you don't really need to sign it, you can just take the certificate, you can sign this though, so we know you were here, and if we don't have an email yet, and
I'm sure you're not,
in our system.
Not CLE.
not COEs.
Not CLE.
Not CL.
No, not CLE.
We don't rise to.
No, but if we sign in so that we do have your email address and your name, that would be helpful.
Yes.
Because we pass this off to our administrative person.
Now, you also have membership, right? And how much does it cost and how do I join? You have a guardian.
Excellent.
Bob, we can't get a CLE because no one cited a case or a statute.
Just a small, I don't remember though, actually. Robin should know.
Hey, Nate, I think we can turn that
Yeah,
off.
yep, she's not in there anymore, so.
Robinson.
Thank you, Corey.
Thanks, Paul. Good job. All right. No one brought the cane out, so we'll,
Easy to fill time with these kinds of cases. Yeah. So much.